I, 28M. Average guy. Work a steady job, keep to myself, and always believe that family should come first. Guess I was a damn fool for thinking that meant anything to my parents. Let me back up. I had a wedding fund. Not some massive trust fund or anything, just money I'd been saving since I was 20. I wasn't even engaged yet, but I always wanted to be the kind of guy who had his life together before proposing. My girlfriend, now fiancé, 27F, and I had been together for 5 years, and I was getting ready to pop the question. I had about $35,000 put away, hard-earned money from overtime, bonuses, and just plain being frugal. Then, out of nowhere, my parents and my younger sister, 23F, decided they needed a family vacation. Not just any vacation, some extravagant, month-long luxury tour through Europe. You know, the kind that costs a fortune. And guess what? My loving, trustworthy parents stole my wedding fund to pay for it. I found out because I logged into my savings account one day and saw that it had been completely wiped out. Gone. Every last cent. I was shaking, thinking there had to be some mistake. I called the bank, and they confirmed it. My parents had access because I'd naively opened the account when I was younger and never removed them as co-owners. I confronted them, and they had the audacity to act like I was overreacting. "It's just money," my mother said with a dismissive wave. "We'll help you save again. You're young," my father added. "You'll make it back." But my sister? Oh, she was the worst. Smirking, twirling her stupid, overpriced designer handbag, and saying, "You weren't even engaged yet, so it's not like you needed it right away." I was done. I went no contact, blocked their numbers, cut them out completely. It was brutal, but I had no choice. My fiancé was incredibly supportive, even offering to help rebuild the fund together. I was furious, but I focused on moving forward. I worked even harder, saved aggressively, and within 2 years, I had rebuilt most of what I lost. Then came karma. A month ago, I get a call from an unknown number. I usually ignore those, but something told me to pick up. It was my mother, crying. "Your father is sick," she sobbed. "We need help." Turns out, my father had a medical emergency. A serious one. Hospital bills piling up, debt collectors calling, everything crumbling. And they had zero savings. You know why? Because they kept up their lavish spending even after blowing through my wedding fund. My sister? Oh, she sure as hell wasn't helping. She was too busy living off Instagram sponsorships and pretending to be an influencer. And now they needed me. The son they stole from. The son they abandoned the second it was convenient. I let them talk. Let my mother beg. Then, when she finally stopped, I simply said, "No." Silence. Then she exploded. Called me ungrateful, selfish, cruel. Said family helps family, and that I was a horrible person for refusing to help my own father. "You stole from me," I said calmly. $35,000. Money I worked for. Money I needed. You laughed in my face when I begged for it back. Now you expect me to save you. "That was different," she screamed. "That was a vacation. This is life and death." "I agree," I said. "So maybe you should have prioritized better." And I hung up. Then I went one step further. I went nuclear. See, my parents had always been shady with money. Not just with me, but in general. Maxed out credit cards, unpaid bills, loans they took out and conveniently forgot to pay back. And over the years, I'd ignored it because, well, they were my parents. But now it was time to expose everything. I knew they were in deep debt. Knew that their house, the one they always bragged about owning outright, turns out they'd refinanced it multiple times. They weren't just broke, they were drowning. And my sister? She was still living the influencer fantasy, pretending she was rich, when in reality, her entire life was built on my parents funding her. She didn't have real income, just sponsorships from random brands that barely covered her designer shopping addiction. So I did some digging, real digging, pulled up their property records. Turns out they were months behind on mortgage payments. I checked court records. They were being sued by multiple creditors. Then I made a few calls. First, to my parents' bank. See, when I was younger, they'd put some accounts in my name, things I hadn't thought about in years. Turns out they had outstanding debts under my name, too. Nothing that could legally screw me over. I checked, but enough to prove they'd been using me as a financial scapegoat. Then, I called the hospital billing department, gave them a little information, asked if there were any payment plans under my parents' name. And guess what? They had lied about being unable to pay. They had assets. Not many, but enough that the hospital could legally pursue collections. So I tipped them off. Next, I sent an anonymous tip to the mortgage lender about the unreported rental income they were making from subletting part of their house. Under the table. Oh, and my sister? Miss, I'm too famous to work a real job. Well, I may have casually emailed the IRS about some income discrepancies on her public sponsorships. Nothing crazy, just enough to trigger an audit. It didn't take long. Within weeks, my parents' house went into foreclosure proceedings. Debt collectors started aggressively pursuing them. The hospital sent legal notices demanding payment. My sister got hit with a full-blown IRS audit, plus penalties. And the best part? They had no clue it was me. Then, one day, my sister finally called me. For the first time since they stole my money. She wasn't laughing anymore. "You ruined us," she hissed. "Mom and Dad are losing everything. My accounts are frozen because of some stupid IRS thing." "What did you do?" I smiled. "Nothing," I said. "I just let karma do its thing." She screamed at me, called me a vindictive bastard, said I was tearing the family apart. "You tore it apart when you stole from me." I shot back. "Now you're just dealing with the consequences." I hung up. Blocked her, too. A week later, my mother showed up at my workplace. I don't know how she got past the front desk, but there she was, hysterical, red-faced, making a scene in the lobby. My manager had to pull me aside and ask if I wanted to call security. I should have, but a part of me wanted to hear her beg in person. So I stepped outside. She grabbed my arm, eyes wild. "Please," she gasped. "We have nowhere to go. The bank is taking the house. Your father is sick. We're your parents." I shook her off. "You were my parents," I corrected. "Then you chose my selfish, entitled sister over me. You stole from me. You mocked me. Now you're suffering the consequences. We just—" Her voice cracked. "We didn't think it was that big of a deal at the time. We thought you'd forgive us." "You didn't even apologize," I said coldly. "You never even tried. You only called when you needed something." She started sobbing. "We made a mistake." "No," I said. "You made a choice. Now live with it." And I walked away. The final blow. Turns out, losing everything made my parents desperate. A few days later, I got a letter from a lawyer. My parents were trying to sue me for financial support. Yeah, they were actually trying to take me to court. Under some bullshit claim that, as their son, I had a legal obligation to help them in their old age. Now, normally, filial responsibility laws don't apply in most U.S. states. But my parents, being the manipulative snakes they were, dug up an obscure state law that technically said I could be held liable for their medical debts if they could prove financial dependency. So I got a lawyer, a good one, and we shredded them. My lawyer dug up everything. The theft of my wedding fund, the financial abuse, the debts they took in my name. He even brought up witnesses, my fiancé, old family friends, even my father's own brother, who testified that my parents had a history of using people for money. The judge took one look at the case and dismissed it immediately. Not only that, my parents were ordered to pay my legal fees. Money they didn't have. So guess what? They had to sell their remaining assets. My mother called me one last time after that. Broken. Defeated. "We're leaving town," she whispered. "We have nothing left here." I didn't reply. Just listened as she cried and hung up. The aftermath. My parents lost their house. They're now living in a tiny apartment 3 states away. My sister's influencer career tanked. Turns out, tax fraud and audits don't exactly scream brand-friendly. She had to get a real job. My fiancé and I, we got married. Small, intimate wedding. Paid for without a single cent from my family. And me? I don't regret a damn thing. Some people say, family is everything. But I say this, family doesn't mean blood. It means loyalty, respect, and trust. They threw all of that away. So, I did the same to them. And to anyone reading this, if you've ever had entitled family members try to use you, abuse you, and then cry for help when karma hits them, just remember, you owe them nothing. Oh, and if you enjoyed this story, subscribe. Unlike my parents, I promise I won't steal your money.